Chapter 9. Bella in snorkeling gear was, well, cute. She was wearing a black bikini today. The form-hugging suit enhanced her shapely figure and was joined in the front with a thick silver ring. Matching rings adorned both of her hips on the high-cut bottoms. The black fabric bore a startling contrast to her milky skin. I steadied my rebellious stomach as I forced myself to assess her bruises. The smaller ones were actually fading. However, the deep purplish hue remained in horrific blotches on much of her skin. I looked down at my toes, digging into the sand, copying Bella's actions from the day before. I ground the fine sand into powder with the pressure of my feet. Bella stood a few paces away, adjusting the fit of her mask and the position of her snorkel.
"I'll be ready in a minute."
She was struggling with a strap on her right fin. With an exhalation of air, she stood up.
"There."
She met my eyes expectantly, then traveled over my brilliant white chest, stomach, down my legs, and back up again. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to explain the odd look on her face. I was more conscious than ever of my skin reflecting the sun's rays around me like 1,000 microscopic prisms.
"Did you know? I've never seen you in shorts before."
I was waiting for the punchline.
"You have nice legs."
I was afraid she was going to say something else. The tension burst out of me with an uncontrolled laugh. Was she serious?
"I'm serious. What's so funny?"
"You are, Bella. Come on, let's go scare some fish." She scowled in return. Bella walked toward the water's edge with an exaggerated clown-like gait. I smothered another laugh. She was trying so hard not to trip over the long fins. I didn't want to distract her. Once in the water, her graceful swimming made me feel guilty about my earlier amusement. Like yesterday with the dolphins, Bella seemed almost at home in this environment. Surrounded by the swirling currents, her body took on an ethereal quality. Her hair billowed like an auburn cloud, each silky strand separately reflecting the light that shone through the surface. I swam with her. Not needing to breathe was more than convenient here. We followed a school of bright yellow fish that darted and swam between rocky outcroppings. Dozens of variety of coral created a fantastic display of natural art, delicate and colorful. Bella was beside herself, discovering something new to marvel over with every dive. We swam for hours, only taking a break for Bella to drink some water and reapply her coconut-scented sunblock. Finally exhausted, Bella pulled off her gear, one piece at a time, and tossed it onto the beach. We lay in the shallows, side by side, gazing up at the cloudless sky. Gentle waves washed up to our shoulders and retreated back into the ocean. Above us, the azure mantle was uninterrupted in its purity. I could barely make out the telltale glint of red reflecting from Mars, invisible to Bella's human eyes. In my mind, I was visualizing astrological charts and trying to remember which constellation Mars would appear in tonight. Unfortunately, Bella's closeness was driving me to distraction. My thoughts were jumbled by her scent and the heat of her figure, so close to mine. I listened to the patterns of the water that swirled about her body. If I focused, I could touch her that softly. I could be as silky as water caressing her skin, soothing away tension and worry, easing her sore muscles. I squeezed my eyes shut and clenched my teeth. My hands were balled into iron fists. The need to reach out and touch her energized every cell in my body, until my entire being was humming with the urgency. Here on this sunlit beach, alone on our solitary island, we had more privacy than we could ever have after returning to Forks. Why didn't I want to trust myself? She said she wasn't hurt very badly. I should respect her enough to trust her judgment, shouldn't I? If this was what we both wanted, then why was I lying here, tied in knots, resisting my desires with every ounce of strength I possessed? I knew what to expect now. I wouldn't lose control. I could love her like she deserved, like she wanted me to. My stubbornness was just that, stubbornness. If we made love, I would be like the water, subtle, serene, gentle. Crash! An unexpected wave broke over us. I was so preoccupied with the temptations of my baser appetite that I had neither felt nor heard the distinct changes in the ocean. If I had, I would have sensed the larger set of waves that were now rolling through our previously tranquil lagoon. Bella coughed and spluttered, scrambling to get to her feet before the next set of waves hit us. My first concern was her safety. However, when I realized that she was fine, I couldn't help but chastise myself. I had let my thoughts run away from me. Water, gentle, great analogy. Bella misinterpreted my scowl, but I wasn't about to explain the truth. Let her think I just didn't like sand up my nose. That was safer. If I encouraged her at all.
Are you okay?
Bella had sand in her hair and down her back, but here she was asking if I was okay. Yes, I'm so sorry. I wasn't paying attention. I should have realized that was coming and warned you. I felt even worse now, in the face of her thoughtful concern.
Edward, you can't possibly protect me from every threat and hazard. It's not like you can control the ocean.
She was consoling me. What for? Of course I can't control the ocean. But inside, what I was really saying was, of course I can't control myself. If we became intimate again, I could hurt her again without even realizing it. Somehow I knew that Bella would be just as forgiving then as she was now. I wouldn't put her in that position. There shouldn't be anything for her to forgive me for. Let's go home. I spoke gruffly. Bella hung back a bit, giving me space. She must have sensed my mood. I did not want to watch the setting sun. I barely registered the darkening sky. Bella washed up while I prepared her dinner. I was surprised that the simple motions of cooking the meal were therapeutic, and my bad humor quickly faded. Bella was dressing in the blue room while I arranged the food on her plate. This was a special meal that I had planned weeks ago. Almond-crested chicken, braised asparagus spears, and an aromatic rice pilaf. When Bella rejoined me, she was already dressed for bed. Her gown tonight was ivory satin, embroidered with tiny roses along the hem. The straps were wide at the shoulders, but tapered before they met the sweetheart neckline. The skirt ended at her knees, but flared slightly and twirled enticingly around her thighs when she walked. I set her food on the table with a glass of Coke, her favorite. She sniffed the air appreciatively. However, instead of darting straight to her seat and devouring the food like she had for the past several meals, she came to me and leaned her head on my chest. I yielded to the moment, thrilled at the feel of her supple body, stroking me like a liquid flame whenever our skin met. My arms wrapped around her, holding her close. The buzzing energy from the rocky cove was back now, and increased tenfold. Bella seemed to feel the intensity of the desire emanating from my body, and she gave me no mercy. Her lips bestowed feather-like kisses across my chest and shoulders, up my neck and along my jaw. My teeth were clenched tight enough to crush iron. Delicate fingers followed those kisses, stroking and teasing, until I drew an uneasy breath. It hissed between my teeth. Our bare calves were intertwined, and I braced myself against the desire to fall to the floor with her in my arms, discarding every carefully constructed restraint.
"Bella," I groaned, "you need to stop."
Another gasping breath tore down my throat with the heat of a wildfire.
"No, I don't, Edward. You're my husband, and I'm your wife. We belong together, exactly like this."
Her leg was rubbing against mine, past my knee and up my outer thigh. Her soft skin sent intense heat melting straight through the material of my shorts. My resolve wavered. The beast rose from its hiding place within me and took control. It only took a split second for her to complete her motion. With my hand under her knee and my other arm pressing her whole body against mine, I spun around and set her up on the counter. Bella's other leg wrapped around me, and I was locked in. Our lips met for the first time in more than 12 hours. The passion that had been building on both sides burst like a dam, unleashing a cataclysmic flood. Bella's fingers dragged through my hair, pulling my face down to her neck. She threw her head back as my lips and tongue followed the contours of her jaw and throat. Her back arched, and I could feel every muscle she possessed straining to mold our bodies together. Her touches last night had simmered with desire. Her forceful manner now was like boiling magma, threatening to explode forth and engulf everything in its path. I was living this moment on two parallel paths. My memory was retracing the first night, feeding the present with a powerful compulsion to abandon all defenses. I brought my lips back to Bella's, hungering for more. I don't know how or why, but the noble part of my soul, if soul is what you could call it, chose that moment to intervene. The present disappeared, and before me I saw a vivid memory. Bella, standing and stretching before me, the beauty of her body overshadowed by injuries wrought by a violent beast. "I have to go." I choked out the words, my face a mask of guilt and self-disgust. I broke free from her embrace and stumbled back 2 steps. She stretched one hand out toward me, gripping the countertop with the other one.
"Edward, please," she begged.
A strangled moan rose from my core. I shook my head in denial. Denial of what I had done. Denial of what I was about to do. I spun on my heel, and faster than she could blink, I was out the door. I heard one despairing sob escape her throat, but I was already hurtling down the beach toward the rocky peak. I never slowed, weaving effortlessly through the close-growing trees and hanging vines of the jungle. My running morphed into a leaping climb as I scaled the last 50 feet to the top of the diminutive mountain. The surface was broken and sharp, crumbling under the force of wind and time. Millennia of torrential rains, blistering sun, and violent winter storms had fragmented the porous rock. Now I felt more pieces disintegrate with every step. I glared at the night sky, hating it for its passive beauty. With a roar of pain, I drove my fist into the ground, burying my arm up to the elbow. I was panting hoarsely, my body mimicking a human panic attack quite accurately. I pulled my clenched fist out of the ground, fixating on the way the powdered fragments of the indigenous rock poured down the muscular contours of my forearm. I alternately flexed and spread my fingers, examining the unmarked skin of my knuckles. Cold, white, alien in the milky moonlight. I crouched there, shaking violently. My throat burned mercilessly. I could not shut out her scent. It clung to my skin, my hair, my clothes. I could not purge her startled face from my sight. Shock and betrayal were the predominant emotions. I had allowed her to get too close again. By doing so, I had hurt her. A few brief moments of gratification were purchased, but at what price? Would my selfishness never end? My throat convulsed with tearless sobs, and I rolled onto my back. Fear, guilt, and shame swirled in a malignant knot in my stomach. I could almost see the cankerous threads of sickly green and black that infected me, staining all of my thoughts with their diseased touch. The demon was so strong, searching for the smallest hint of weakness. Whenever lust colored my thoughts, it growled and advanced. My lust for Bella seemed to tower over, even drowned out, my love at times. And at those times I was terrified for her, and disgusted with myself. But didn't lust and love sometimes walk hand in hand? Surely the looks Bella cast my way were smoldering with more than just love. She had made no secret of her desire to make love with me, even months before we were married. Loving Bella, wanting to be with Bella, was a weakness? How had I come to this? Was I truly fighting a demon? Or was this simply a manifestation of fears born from decades of loneliness? My fear of losing Bella had been magnified 100 times since the day when I had truly believed she was dead. Remembering again the anguish on her face, I realized it was becoming a greater threat to her than any physical danger. I felt like a coward. Bella was eating dinner alone, probably crying herself to sleep in our sad excuse for our marital bed, and I was afraid to go to her. I was too terrified of the demon inside me to offer her the smallest comfort. A hug, a gentle kiss. I sighed. I lay in silence for over an hour. My eyes were shut, but I could feel the silvery light of the moon on my skin. I could sense the oh-so-subtle tug of its gravity as it pulled the ocean's water toward high tide. Gradually, the gentle night air soothed the anguished lines on my face. My revelation came softly, almost stealthily into my mind. She needed me, as I needed her. I will make this up to her. I felt stronger and freer. I knew that my love for Bella was greater than any selfish temptation. I would not slip up again. It was like the shackles had fallen from my wrists as I disowned the monster within me. He would never hold sway over my thoughts or actions again. My desire for Bella was still great, but it felt pure, for having been distilled in the crucible of her pain and my fear. I looked up at the brilliant moon. I still heard the soft echo of Bella's melodic voice.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Her face. Beautiful. Our love. Beautiful. Our future. With a satisfied smile, I leapt from the peak, casting my body hundreds of feet forward with one powerful leap. As I plummeted down, my eyes picked out each ripple of the water, each shallowed coral outcropping. My body sliced into the water, making the smallest splash, barely disrupting the shimmering surface. As I dove into the water, I felt washed clean, reborn. I swam swiftly back to the north. It was getting late, and Bella should not have to sleep alone. A vibrant melody was building in my head. The harmony joined, and then mellow arpeggios grew in strength, until the entire complexity of the composition was playing through my mind. It was the story of our love and passion, and it was far from over. I did not pause in my headlong rush until I was standing in front of the bed, looking down on her sleeping form. Bella's face was relaxed in slumber, but the lines near her eyes told me she had needed to cry herself to sleep. My throat ached with remorse. Hadn't I promised never to leave her again? Hadn't I sworn that she would never be alone? But I had broken my word. I had betrayed her trust. My honor was not enough to overcome my weaknesses. Or was it? Could I be strong enough for her? I would certainly expend every last ounce of my energy trying. I was still wet from my swim, so I quickly showered and dressed in a pair of gray cotton pajama pants and a white t-shirt. I towel-dried my hair and climbed into bed next to Bella. She was sleeping on top of the sheets, and I carefully lay down against her side. With tender kisses, I erased her tears. Her lips were parted, in the barest hint of a smile. A tremor of relief and joy reverberated through my heart. I embraced my body's need for her. I savored the steady warmth that was filling my stomach with a strange sense of anticipation. With fear evicted, I was able to enjoy the intense melody of feelings and emotions that combined to form the throbbing need inside of me. Knowing that I would wait, for weeks if necessary, put a painful pressure on that need. But even the pain was different now. This was not an anguished longing. There was no despair or self-loathing. Instead, this was a pain of hunger unrelieved, of thirst unquenched. The anticipation of satisfying the need was its own kind of intoxicating draught. I was drunk with love. I did not want to spend a moment away from Bella's side. She hadn't breathed a word in her sleep for days. However, I could never stop myself from listening and hoping. The voice of an angel, murmuring my name. It was a silly desire, but I had spent so many nights waiting for that sound, and reveling in the joy it brought me each time. I could not quit the habit now, just because Bella was too exhausted to dream. When the sensations within me became too strong for comfort, I got up in search of a distraction. Esme had a collection of books and DVDs in the TV room. I grabbed a book at random and returned to the bed. The volume was thick and dog-eared. The binding was creased and worn, obviously one of Esme's favorites, Gone with the Wind. I had seen the movie decades ago, and relaxed into a pillow to explore the Civil War-torn southern states and the whirlwind life of a Southern belle. I was halfway through the spellbinding novel when Bella began to wake up. Propped up on my elbow, I looked at her face, waiting for that miraculous moment when her eyes would open and find me. It was a moment I anticipated with pleasure, every night since the first night she had asked me to stay with her. I was confused by the anger and pain when they did open. Of course, Bella knew nothing of my epiphany. She had every right to be angry with me. "Good morning, love," I breathed. My greeting was met with silence, as if she didn't trust her voice. I lowered my eyes, thinking of the best way to word my apology. Bella, I need to apologize. The way I behaved last night was inexcusable. I told you before that I would not make love with you until you've been changed. I swore that I would do everything in my power to make you happy and not hurt you, and then I did the opposite. I toyed with your emotions. I should never have allowed things to progress like they did last night. I was ashamed when I remembered how I had led her on. When I looked back into her eyes, there was no improvement. If anything, she looked angrier. Her eyes flashed at me, and her lips were set in a grim line.
"So where did you go last night?"
she demanded. I rolled onto my back, casting a sidelong glance at her annoyed countenance, and decided to tell her as much of the truth as I could. I was afraid that I would hurt you again. That night, when we made love, I lost control. Something inside of me took over. It was too powerful for me to fight, like I was possessed. I felt possessed. I hated myself afterwards, when I saw what I had done to you, how I had hurt you. I paused to take a shaky breath. I had promised not to show Bella my pain, but this was necessary for her to understand how last night had changed me. You cannot know the depth of my desire to be with you, in every way. That night, what I felt was the most intense pleasure. It was more than I could ever have imagined. These last 2 days have been torture for me, because I wanted you, but I feared for you. Last night, I cast off that fear. There is no demon inside me now. I will remain in control, and I am not afraid.
"So, you've changed your mind?"
The tentative hope in her voice alerted me to the fact that she had misinterpreted my words. "No," I corrected her hastily. "You are too fragile. I could still hurt you, perhaps even worse than before. I was just trying to explain that I'm no longer going to run from you. I'm no longer afraid."
"What?"
Bella sat up and faced me. Her anger was back and more focused than before.
"Why even bother apologizing if you have no intention of changing the very thing that caused the problem?"
Her bitter words opened a new wound in my heart. "Bella, please. You know it has to be this way. It won't be long. Once I change you, we never have to worry about this again." Bella's eyes narrowed into a fierce scowl. Her lower lip was pushed out in an adorable pout. Her anger caused 2 bright spots of color to appear on her cheeks, so much more vivid than her gentle blushes. I was more attracted to her than ever, but she had other thoughts. She eyed the book in my hand.
"Gone with the Wind?"
I nodded, caught off guard by the change in subject.
"Do you know the story?"
she continued. I shook my head slowly, still confused. "I've seen the movie."
"Well, then you know,"
she continued, her eyes boring into mine.
"Rhett loved Scarlett unconditionally for years. He waited for her, placing her wishes and needs before his own. All the time she was hurting him with her stubborn selfishness. By the time she woke up and realized it, their relationship was already broken, and they had nothing. Enjoy your book."
Bella flounced out of the room. Seconds later, the bathroom door shut with a loud thud. I sat there, astonished by her vehemence. Bella rarely raised her voice in anger. The threat in her words was obvious, but did she really think a bond like ours could be destroyed over something as trivial as physical love? Our love spanned the distance between 2 species, fusing reality and mythology in a timeless, ageless, unconditional union. Again, I had misjudged the depth of her feelings. I could only hope that she would let go of her anger and hurt, that she would consider and understand the words I had spoke earlier. With a defeated sigh, I returned the offending novel to its place on the bookshelf and wandered into the kitchen. Even if she hated me, she would still need to eat. I prepared scrambled eggs again, taking a vindictive satisfaction in breaking the eggs one at a time. When she entered the kitchen a half-hour later, Bella did not meet my eyes, and refused to speak with me. Her foul temper persisted until I suggested revisiting the dolphins. This cheered her up a bit, and we spent the next several days in various forms of recreation. I still caught Bella watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. The desire in her eyes was overshadowed by a hopelessness that wrenched my heart. Several times she invited me to join her in the TV room to watch a romantic movie, but I knew better than to encourage her, or myself, with hours intertwined on the couch. We needed to avoid another incident like the one in the kitchen. I would smoothly change the subject to something more outdoorsy. She invariably gave in, and we ranged across the island, swam or snorkeled for hours. We even built sandcastles during low tide one day. I thought she was having fun. Her face was often wreathed in smiles, and her voice was animated as we talked about the things we had seen and experienced in the last week. However, I could not get past the regret I felt for the vague sadness that pinched the corners of her eyes, or the tense crease between her eyebrows when she was lost in thought. With the long hours of strenuous exercise every day, Bella was eating more than ever, and slept so deeply she barely moved or made a sound. One evening she even fell asleep at the table while I was in the shower. When I found her there, slumped over her half-finished dinner, I gathered her up from her chair and carried her back into the bedroom. Seeing the dark circles under her eyes, feeling the exhaustion that weighed down her limbs, I felt guilty and miserable about what I was doing. But did I really have any other option? No, I didn't. Nights were the hardest for me. Since that first evening, Bella's outfits had gotten progressively, well, less modest. Last night she had come out of the bedroom brushing her hair. I was caught off guard by the instant reaction within me when I saw how little she was wearing. I concealed my response by burying my face in the book I was reading. Not a romance this time. This was the history of diamond mining, one of Carlyle's books. Fascinating in a dry, non-sexual kind of way. I had to read to keep my mind occupied. Every time I found myself admiring the reflection of the moonlight on her thigh, or the swell of her chest as it rose and fell in her sleep, I had to remind myself to contain the heat. I didn't know when I started counting down the days, but with each dawn I breathed a sigh of relief and crossed out another day on my mental calendar. The last century didn't hold a candle to the perpetual waiting I faced now. I reclined on the silk-draped bed, finishing the last chapter of my book. It discussed in detail the progression of mining equipment over the last millennium, and how sophisticated mining techniques were affecting the global diamond market. In the back of my mind, I was mulling over the best way to explain the feathers in the other room to the cleaning crew, which were due in tomorrow morning. They were also restocking the refrigerator. We were getting dangerously low on eggs. I guess the protein and cholesterol were good for Bella with her increased activity level, but even so. Bella's heartbeat, a part of me was always intimately aware of its proximity and pace, grew louder as she left the bathroom and walked down the short hall. She stepped into the room, and no amount of self-control could stop the instantaneous fire that blasted through my starving body. Yes, the urge had progressed so far beyond hunger that every cell in my body felt starved for her. Bella was a vision in a black negligee. Her hair fell in dark waves around her narrow shoulders. The lingerie she wore had a lace top that lifted her breasts and pressed them together to form a jaw-dropping line of cleavage. Lace as delicate as spider silk fell in a transparent curtain that only tempted my eyes to linger on her curves, focusing through the veil to drink in her tiny waist, the smooth curves of her hips, and the barely there lace panties beneath. I wrestled my rebellious body into submission and smoothed my features into a calm, welcoming smile. She spun in a graceful pirouette before me.
"What do you think?"
Her voice was like melting chocolate, heavy and sweet with promises of sensory delight. My eyes captured every line and curve, each reflection and shadow. The short dress lifted as she spun, exposing her heavenly bottom, which was only partially covered with black lace. Days of constant activity had given Bella's body a firmness and grace and movement that she had never had before. Toned muscles in her taut stomach and luscious legs flexed and rippled as she turned. Even with layers of sunblock, her skin had picked up a faint golden tone, glowing with a radiant heat that made my chest ache with longing. I wanted nothing more than to stroke every inch of her flawless skin, to savor the tremors of her body as I sought her pleasure. I cleared my throat and tried to clear my mind. "You look beautiful. You always do." My voice sounded so much more contained than I felt. My skin felt tight, too constricting. I was wound like a spring, and it would only take one nudge to make me burst out of control.
"Thanks,"
she replied. Her voice was off. It sounded as if she were disappointed in my reaction, but completely unsurprised by that disappointment. She climbed into bed next to me, offering no resistance as I pulled her against my chest. I didn't know how to have her next to me right now. However, this was routine, and to act otherwise, she would suspect something was bothering me. I was so close to the edge that I didn't know if I could touch and smell her without giving in. Her skin was an open flame, scorching me with its heat.
"I'll make you a deal."
Her voice was sluggish with sleep, but her eyes watched mine closely. "I will not make any deals with you." That was exactly how we ended up here in this stalemate. She had wanted to compromise. She would marry me if I made love to her as a human. Oh, the memory of that first night tore through my mind, singeing everything in its path, until I felt like my entire skull was in flames, flames of passionate desire.
"You haven't even heard what I'm offering."
"No, but I can guess what she wanted in return. It doesn't matter. I will not give in. I will not waver." My chant was losing its effectiveness through days of constant overuse.
"Dang it, and I really wanted—" "Oh well."
"You did not just say that," my mind screamed. She knew very well how much I craved the opportunity to give her something, anything. It was a privilege she bestowed on others, but not on me, her husband. And now, she wanted something, and it felt too cruel to deny her without hearing what it was, even if I knew it was an impossible request. "All right, what is it you want?" My soul groaned, knowing what answer I would be forced to give.
"Well, I was thinking, I know the whole Dartmouth thing was just supposed to be a cover story, but honestly, one semester of college probably wouldn't kill me. Charlie would get a thrill out of Dartmouth stories, I bet. Sure, it might be embarrassing if I can't keep up with all the brainiacs. Still, 18, 19, it's really not such a big difference. It's not like I'm going to get crow's feet in the next year." She shrugged her shoulders as she repeated my own words back to me, words I had argued to convince her of the folly of discarding her humanity so quickly. I was in shock. This was the furthest thing from my thoughts. Dartmouth? But then that meant, you would wait. You would stay human. My voice was void of all emotion or inflection. Once, those words would have brought me relief and joy. This is what I wanted, wasn't it? For Bella to live a normal human life, as she would have before my unnatural existence threw her world into chaos. She shifted the tiniest amount in my arms, and my body reacted, as any man's would. I restrained that reaction with a rush of sudden anger. I had been counting down the days, living each moment in an agony of barely controlled desire, and now days would become months, or years. Where were my selfless thoughts now? I was furious. "Why are you doing this to me? Isn't it hard enough without all of this?" I brushed my hand across the lace that was gathered on her hips, indicating the seductive ensemble. I almost tore it from her body in my frustration. I will not give in. I will not waver. No, nothing had changed. She didn't really want to go to college. She was just trying a new tactic, since her other attempts at seduction had failed. "It doesn't matter. I won't make any deals with you." "I want to go to college," she pressed.
"No, you don't," I retorted. Or at least, if she did, it was because she didn't think I was strong enough to resist her advances. As if I would risk hurting her again to take my pleasure. I have waited for decades. A few years was nothing. I wasn't entirely convinced, but it was the truth. I just had to force my eager body to acknowledge it. "And there's nothing worth risking your life again, that's worth hurting you," I finished out loud.
"But I do want to go. Well, it's not college as much as I want to be human a little while longer."
Another example of the changeable nature of humans. Bella had executed an abrupt about-face. Now that she was agreeing with my arguments, would I have the strength to support her while keeping my word? The pit of my belly throbbed in response. I squeezed my eyes shut and exhaled through my nose, willing her scent to leave me so that I could think more clearly.
You are making me insane, Bella. Haven't we had this argument a million times? You always begging to be a vampire without delay,
and me always urging her to wait, until now, that is.
Yes, but, well, I have a reason to be human that I didn't have before.
What's that? Did I really have to ask? The non-existent nightgown was communicating her feelings pretty effectively.
Yes.
Bella pulled herself up to kiss me. I wanted to drown in the sensation of her lips, soft and pliable against mine. They tempted me with their smooth wetness. I pulled her away gently, unable to stand the temptation of her delectable kisses. I cradled her against my chest. She wanted me to say it out loud. You want to have sex as a human, risking your life for the gratification of the flesh. You are so human, Bella, ruled by your hormones.
That's the whole point, Edward. I like this part of being human.
She stared me in the eye, trying to convey how important this was to her. The obvious lethargy that shadowed her expressions and movement gave me hope that I would be able to end this argument swiftly.
I don't want to give it up yet. I don't want to wait through years of being a blood-crazed newborn for some part of this to come back to me.
The yawn that had been building finally won. I smiled as she struggled to suppress it, and failed. You're tired. Sleep, love. I began humming the lullaby that I had composed for her almost 2 years ago. It never failed to soothe her.
I wonder why I'm so tired. That couldn't be part of your scheme or anything.
Her lower lip pushed forward in a petulant frown. I chuckled. I wasn't going to deny it. I continued the lullaby, urging her to relax and sleep.
For as tired as I've been, you'd think I'd sleep better.
Really? I had never seen her sleep so deeply for so long. You've been sleeping like the dead, Bella. You haven't said a word in your sleep since we got here. If it weren't for your snoring, I'd worry you were slipping into a coma, I teased.
I haven't been tossing? That's weird. Usually I'm all over the bed when I'm having nightmares, and shouting.
This alarmed me. I hated to see Bella in any kind of pain. The menace of her own imagination was not something I could fight. There was no enemy for me to confront. I felt helpless. You've been having nightmares?
Vivid ones. They make me so tired.
She yawned again, as if to emphasize this point.
I can't believe I haven't been babbling about them all night.
What are they about?
Different things, but the same, you know, because of the colors.
Colors? Human dreams were normally darker and out of focus, similar to human memories, when compared to vampires.
It's all so bright and real. Usually when I'm dreaming, I know that I am. With these, I don't know that I'm asleep. It makes them scarier.
I wanted to reassure her. There was no longer anything to be frightened of. Although, with the dangers she had faced over the last 2 years, I was not surprised that some fears were resurfacing now. She had always handled the stress too well. Perhaps the suppressed emotions were finally trying to free themselves. She should face them head-on. I would battle the specters of the past for her, with her. What is frightening you?
Mostly...
She hesitated. Her shoulders shook minutely. Mostly? My protective nature was impatient to know what it was she faced, alone in her human dreams.
The Volturi.
Her voice was a whisper. The carefully restrained horror on her face told me more than anything else. I had not seen her this distressed since we fought Victoria. The threat of their return, and their insistence that she be changed soon, was disturbing her sleep unnecessarily. They aren't going to bother us any more. You'll be immortal soon, and they'll have no reason. I hugged her tighter. I wanted her to see that with me by her side, she had no reason to fear anything. What can I do to help?
They're just dreams, Edward.
She was so noble, trying to be strong, so as not to hurt me with her pain. My heart swelled with love for my brave, stubborn girl. Fine. If she wouldn't speak to me about her dreams, at least I could help to keep them at bay. Do you want me to sing to you? I'll sing all night if it'll keep the bad dreams away.
They're not all bad.
She was trying to reassure me.
Some are nice. So colorful. Underwater with the fish and the coral. It seems like it's really happening. I don't know that I'm dreaming. Maybe this island is the problem. It's really bright here.
I didn't realize that Bella was unhappy here. She would never want to offend me by asking to cut our stay short. Do you want to go home?
No, not yet. Can we stay a little longer?
I tried not to think about how little she would be wearing a week from now, with the current trend. I wrapped my thoughts back in on themselves. We can stay as long as you want, Bella, I promised, although I was going to need a new talisman to keep my dreams at bay. My mantra was worn out completely.
When does the semester start? I wasn't paying attention before.
I sighed. She relaxed into my embrace, and I began her lullaby anew. I had seen a book on the shelf earlier, about the development of antivenom using the venom of snakes. I forced my mind down a different path of meditation. With this book in his collection, was Carlyle researching the possibility of a cure for vampirism? An antivenom for the undead? It was a stimulating topic for my mind to explore, and I did so wholeheartedly. Anything to keep my mind from the feel of the angel lying in my arms. The night advanced slowly. I had exhausted my attempts at diverting my thoughts, and was now struggling to smother the persistent flames of desire that were flickering within me. I applied constant pressure to the powerful urges, but I could feel myself losing ground. A glance at the clock showed me that I was still hours away from a reprieve from this torture. Bella shifted in my arms with a gasp. "Bella, are you all right, sweetheart?" I tightened my arms around her, willing away the nightmare that had woken her.
"Oh!"
Tears were coursing down her face. Her gasp was laden with anguish so intense I wanted to cry with her.
"Bella, what's wrong?"
I tried to wipe away the tears, but more sprang forth. What had she seen that would cause this reaction? My imagination was running away from me. The Volturi attacking, fighting our family, kidnapping Bella. I choked down my own panic.
"It was only a dream."
She spoke in a strangled voice. Her sob belayed the truth. Her face was etched with grief and loss. "It's okay, love. You're fine. I'm here. Did you have another nightmare? It wasn't real. It wasn't real." I rocked her in my arms, like a parent comforting a child. She felt so fragile in my arms. I couldn't fully control my emotions. It went against the grain to be so passive when something was hurting her. I wanted to fight it.
"Not a nightmare. It was a good dream."
She shook her head, rubbing the tears away. Her voice broke with some unnamed emotion. "Then why are you crying?" I stopped rocking her, bewildered. Without seeing inside her mind, I relied on voice, body language, facial expressions. How did her reaction point to anything but a terrible nightmare?
"Because I woke up,"
she cried out. Her arms were tight around my neck, as she shook with bone-raking sobs. Her tears scalded my neck and chest. A good dream? She wasn't scared or hurt? Then why the intense pain? Why did she look so lost and despairing? "Everything's all right, Bella. Take deep breaths." I altered my voice to be smooth and comforting. I stemmed my own anxiety, waiting for her to calm down.
"It was so real. I wanted it to be real,"
she wailed, sounding for all the world like a person who had lost their love in a tragic accident. At least then I wouldn't be in the dark. At least then I could understand.
"We were on the beach."
Her voice trailed off. Her eyes were red, and her tear-stained face searched mine. The pain receded, but was replaced with a look of indecision. And? I needed her to continue, to explain her confusing behavior.
"Oh, Edward!"
Another tear rolled down her face. The desolation in her voice cut me like 1,000 knives. "Tell me, Bella." I was feeling desperate and helpless and confused. She shook her head, as if fighting a decision inside her mind. Then her arms were around my neck again, her lips pressed against mine, with a feverish need that matched my own. Our irrepressible passion for one another clashed like cymbals inside my mind. My body was ready to be with her, right now. All of my arguments were slipping away, and I clung to the image of her battered body. It had saved me before. My entire body recoiled from the pain I was sure to cause her. I grasped her shoulders, struggling with her need and my own, but anxious not to hurt her in any way. "No, Bella." I had never seen her so frantic, so out of control. As I watched, her face fell. New tears, heavier than before, streamed down her face, and she sobbed in defeat. "I'm sorry." So fragile, so lost, so... My heart constricted. I pulled her against my chest, moaning in my own torment. "I can't, Bella. I can't." "Please." Her voice was muffled against my chest. I fought back against the guilt and longing that were dragging me under. "Please, Edward." The voice of an angel, beseeching me. Her trembling body awoke in me every tender thought I had ever held for her. The pleading words, like the first time she had begged me to make love with her, the night she had agreed to marry me. I had never been so happy or felt so complete. And now, could I deny her the one thing she had ever asked for, the only gift she had ever wanted from me? I had conquered the demon within me, but I could not fight my desire and hers. My surrender had been inevitable from the moment I saw her tears. I could not refuse my Bella, and I knew I didn't want to. With a helpless groan, I brought Bella's tremulous lips back to mine, kissing her with the force of my bottomless longing. Her mouth was like a succulent rose, with petals of velvet and an enticing aroma. Bella shifted in my embrace, stretching her full length against me, intertwining our legs with an aggressive abandon. I grasped her face with both hands, drawing up her chin so that I could taste the sweetness of her neck. Her blood pulsed beneath my lips and tongue, enveloping me with its heady scent. Bella's body was molded against mine, her fingers clutching at my shirt, and her negligee riding up over her hips. With a growl, I rotated us, positioning myself on top of her. Bella groaned when I continued my exploration of her neck and shoulders with my lips. Unlike before, when Bella had remained somewhat passive and receptive to my attentions, she was returning my strokes and caresses with manipulations of her own. Her hands were under my shirt, rubbing over my back and around my shoulders. A glowing light seemed to hum around us, illuminating the bed in the otherwise dark room. I pushed back to a kneeling position, tore my shirt off, and threw it into the shadows. Bella's eyes shone at me, and her face was dazzling. I marveled again at her lustrous hair, flowing like a dark cloud around her face. Wide brown eyes gazed expectantly at me, and her tongue ran seductively over her lower lip. "Is this really what you want?" I murmured between kisses.
"Oh, Edward, I've been so desperate all week, afraid that I would never feel—"
Tears sprang into her eyes again. With a mortified sigh, I kissed them away, savoring the flavor. I whispered reassurances, professed my love and passion for her. I swore that I would never abandon her like that again. She nodded to acknowledge my words, but she was still choking on her tears. With a strangled sound, her lips locked onto mine with a newfound power. When we first gave ourselves to one another, there had been hesitation, born of fear and nervousness. Tonight, we delayed the inevitable because our passion burned too brightly. Our days of abstinence had intensified our needs. We both lived out every imagined touch and motion from the preceding days. Bella was braver than me. Her hand ran down my back, and I arched against her touch. When her fingers lifted my waistband, and her hand continued exploring, I threw my head back in shock. The fire had erupted into an inferno. With a swiftness she could not react to, I grabbed the bodice of her gown and tore it down the middle. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before removing the delicate black lace panties in the same way. Her body was bare before me now. I ran my hands down Bella's sides, murmuring her name as I gently grasped her legs behind the knees, pulling her closer. I was surprised when she resisted me. I raised a curious eyebrow at her. In response, she braced her hand on my shoulder, and her body twisted, indicating a change of position. I complied readily, eager to continue our passionate exchange. I was on my back now, with Bella straddling my hips. Her confidence astounded me, as she stroked and kissed my chest and stomach with cool self-assurance. I didn't think there could be anything sexier than the way Bella had received me before. But now, her attitude, her womanly seduction, was driving me insane. Bella was nibbling my ear now. She kissed and bit my flesh, making me groan and shake with each new sensation. I could not wait any longer. I broke away from her kiss, forcing her to sit back. She rocked over me, moaning, with her fingers clenched against my marble-hard chest. The flames inside of me burned brighter. Her gasps and groans were growing in volume. I could not see through the pounding in my head. My senses were boiling, overloaded, overstimulated, overwhelmed with the crushing force of my need. Bella was leaning forward, gasping for air, but never slowing her frenzied tempo. I had my hands on her hips now, guiding her. I was growling. The need inside me was taking over. I remembered this. The pressure building and building, before the floodgates opened in a final release. I remembered the spasmodic shock waves that sent my mind into oblivion. The need to lose control warred with my determination to restrain myself from any kind of action that would harm Bella. I tried to pull away, afraid of the potential danger that loomed before me, but Bella pursued me until I was backed against the headboard, trapped. Bella cried out then in ecstasy, pushing me over the edge. In a desperate gesture, I reached up and dug my fingers deep into the headboard. I focused on the molten core of my being, and channeled the exploding passion out of my stomach, along my rigid arm, and into the wood of the bed frame. My fingers tore through the wood, showering us with chunks and splinters. Bella's cries subsided, fading into softer sighs, at each diminishing pulse and vibration of our union. My breathing was hoarse with spent emotion, as I gathered her into my arms. This was more, so much more than my highest hopes could have foretold. Bella, warm and safe and satisfied, she melted into my embrace, as we drifted on the exhilarating paths of our sated passions.